Welcome. Today I'm going to tell you an amazing story. If you're ready, subscribe first, then let's embark on this journey together. Here we go. Many years ago, in southern Spain, at the foot of the Sierra Nevada mountains, one of the most magnificent palaces humanity had ever seen began to rise. Its name, Alhambra, came from the Arabic word for red. As the sun set, the red clay mortar used in its walls would glow with a brilliant crimson, as if the entire palace were ablaze. This was not just a palace. This was a dream cast in stone. It was the last breath of a civilization. And one day, it would witness history's bitterest tears. Our story begins in 1238. Muhammad ibn Yusuf ibn Nasser, known as Muhammad I, the founder and first Nasrid emir of the Emirate of Granada, paused as he climbed Sabika Hill and gazed at the city for a long time. Before his eyes lay an ancient story. On this hill, there was a fortress dating back to the Roman Empire. Then the Visigoths had used it. Later, in the 11th century, a Jewish vizier named Samuel ibn Nagrilla had built a palace here. But now, this hill was preparing for another destiny. Muhammad I was a ruler with a thick beard and determined eyes. In Al-Andalus, Islamic civilization was in decline. Christian kings, with their Reconquista movement, were conquering Islamic lands from south to north. Toledo had fallen in 1085. Córdoba, that magnificent city of science and art, had fallen to the Christians in 1236. Seville would soon fall too. Only Granada remained. And Muhammad I wanted to make this last Islamic stronghold eternal. Here, he told his men, it is here that we will bring paradise to earth. The day he gave his command, workers swarmed Sabika Hill. First, the walls were built. Water channels extending from the Darro River to the fortress were constructed. The vaulted waterways were engineering marvels. But Muhammad I did not just want a military stronghold. He wanted a monument to a civilization. Years passed. After Muhammad I, his grandson Muhammad II, then Muhammad III, ascended the throne. Each ruler added something to the Alhambra. But the real turning point came with the ascension of Ismail I in 1314. Ismail I was young and ambitious. Even while fighting King Ferdinand IV of Castile, he continued the construction of the Alhambra. Our enemies attack us with swords, he said. We will answer them with beauty. He laid the foundations of the Comares Palace. He built the royal baths. He established the Rada, the Nasrid cemetery. The marble tombstones were adorned with the finest examples of Arabic calligraphy. The walls were covered with verses from the Quran and lines from poets like Ibn al-Jayab. But Ismail I's greatest work was an architectural vision. He wanted to transform the Alhambra not just into a fortress, but into an art gallery, a book of poetry, a philosophical text. Every wall, every column, every pool carried a meaning. In 1333, Yusuf I ascended the throne. This young sultan carried his father's vision even further. During his reign, the Alhambra achieved its classic form. Yusuf I completed the Comares Tower. This tower was the most magnificent structure of the Alhambra. From the outside, it looked like a solid fortress, tall, imposing, menacing. But once inside, a completely different world opened up. The Gate of Justice was one of Yusuf I's most important works. Its inscription, dated 1348, is still legible today. Above the gate, there is a figure of a key and a hand. The key symbolizes the Prophet Muhammad's key to paradise. The hand represents the hand of Fatima, a protector against evil. But beyond these, there was a mystical belief: the Alhambra will only fall when the hand eats the key. Meaning, never. During Yusuf I's reign, new towers were added to the palace complex. The Comares Tower, the Qadi Tower, the Hills Tower, the Concubines Tower. Each tower had a story. The Concubines Tower is named after the story of a Christian princess held there. According to legend, this princess fell in love with a Muslim prince. But this love never came to fruition. The princess would shed tears as she watched Granada from the tower window. In 1354, Yusuf I died. His son V succeeded him, Muhammad passed away. And behold, the golden age of the Alhambra began during the time of this young sultan. When Muhammad V ascended to his father's throne in 1354, he was only 20 years old. He was a young, handsome prince who loved poetry. But he was also a sharp-witted strategist. His first act was to sign a peace treaty with King Pedro of Castile. Pedro was known as Pedro the Cruel. He was a ruthless, calculating man. But Muhammad V managed to establish a diplomatic balance with him. Thanks to this treaty, a period of peace that would last for years began. And Muhammad V used this time to complete the Alhambra. My father and grandfather created the soul of this palace, Muhammad V told his viziers. And I will give it a body. First, he completed the tower of Abu el-Hajjaj, which his father had left unfinished. Then, he began the construction of the Comares Palace. The Comares Palace would be the heart of the Alhambra. The Court of the Myrtles, Patio de los Arayanes, was the main courtyard of the palace. It was 43 meters long and 23 meters wide. In the middle, there was a large pool, so still that the sky reflected on its surface like a perfect mirror. Myrtle bushes lined both sides of the pool. Myrtle, in Islamic tradition, was the tree of paradise. When its leaves were crushed, a fragrant scent would spread. At the northern end of the courtyard, the Comares Tower rose. And inside the tower, there was the Hall of the Ambassadors, Sala de los Embajadores. The Hall of the Ambassadors was the largest room in the Alhambra. It was 11 square meters, and its ceiling was 23 meters high. The Sultan would sit on his throne here and receive ambassadors. The throne was placed directly opposite the entrance. Thus, everyone who entered would first see the majesty of the Sultan. But the true magic of the hall was in its ceiling. The ceiling was made of more than 8,000 wooden pieces interlocked with muqarnas. Each piece formed a different geometric pattern. And when all of them came together, they represented the 7-layered sky. According to Islamic cosmology, paradise is on the 7th layer. And as the Sultan sat on his throne, it was as if paradise was above his head. The walls were covered with stucco carvings, geometric patterns, floral motifs, calligraphy. Every centimeter was meticulously crafted. But the most striking feature was a sentence written repeatedly on the walls. La Galib illallah. There is no victor but Allah. This was the motto of the Nasrid dynasty. Everywhere, on the walls, ceilings, arches, fountains, this sentence was written. A reminder, human power is temporary. Only the power of Allah is eternal. After completing the Hall of the Ambassadors, Muhammad V set about creating another masterpiece, the Court of the Lions, Patio de los Leones. The Court of the Lions is the most famous part of the Alhambra. It is 28 meters long and 16 meters wide. Around the courtyard, there are 124 marble columns. The columns are so slender and elegant that they seem to float in the air. The arches above the columns are filled with stalactite-like muqarnas decorations. In the center of the courtyard is the famous Fountain of the Lions, Fuente de los Leones. 12 marble lions carry a large basin on their backs. Water gushes from the mouths of the lions. This fountain was not just decorative. It was also an engineering marvel. The water from the fountain was distributed to all 4 sides of the courtyard through underground channels. The 4 rivers symbolized the 4 directions. And according to Islamic tradition, there are 4 rivers in paradise. Around the Court of the Lions, there were 4 halls. To the east, the Hall of the Two Sisters, Sala de dos Hermanas. Its name comes from the 2 large marble slabs side by side on the floor. This hall was the Sultan's private room. Its ceiling was covered with honeycomb-like muqarnas. The craftsmanship was so detailed that when light hit the ceiling, it seemed as if stars were sparkling. To the west, the Hall of the Abencerrages, Sala de los Abencerrages. This hall is famous for a bloody legend. According to the legend, Boabdil, the last Sultan of Granada, invited the chiefs of the Abencerrage tribe to this hall. And there, he massacred them all. The red stains on the ceiling were said to be the blood of the massacre. But in reality, Those stains came only from iron oxide. To the north, the Hall of the Muhakkaks. To the south, the Hall of the Kings, Sala de los Reyes. On the ceiling of the Hall of Kings, there were rare examples of 14th century painting. Portraits of 10 Nasrid sultans were painted on leather. After Muhammad V completed the Court of the Lions, he had his vizier, Ibn Zamrak, compose a poem. This poem was inscribed on the walls of the courtyard. A silver garden, its waters flow like pearls. Marble columns, shining like crystal. Lions, carrying the pool on their backs. And serving the Sultan, silently, faithfully. Muhammad V's reign was interrupted twice. The first time, in 1359, he was deposed by his half-brother Ismail. But he soon returned. He ascended to the throne again in 1362 and ruled until 1391. During this long reign, the Alhambra was completed. The Mekshur was redecorated. The Tower of the Princesses was built. The Generalife Gardens were expanded. The Generalife, Jannat al-Arif, Architect's Garden, was located a little further from the Alhambra, on the Hill of the Sun. This was the Sultan's summer palace. Courtyards, pools, fountains, flower gardens. Every corner exuded peace and tranquility. In the court of the water channel, Patio de la Acequia, a long water channel ran through the middle of the courtyard. On both sides, rose gardens, orange trees, cypresses. The gurgling of the water mingled with the sounds of birds. It was said that under the service of Sultan Soraya, meetings between Muhammad VII's wife Soraya and her lover took place. When Muhammad V died in 1391, he left behind a magnificent legacy. The Alhambra was now complete. It was the pinnacle of Islamic art and architecture. But unfortunately, this beauty would not last long. As the 15th century began, the Nasrid dynasty entered a period of decline. There were no longer magnificent sultans. Instead, weak, indecisive rulers who quarreled among themselves had taken their place. During the reign of Muhammad VII, 1392 to 1408, only one structure was added, the Tower of the Princesses, Torre de las Infantas. This small but elegant tower was the last major structure of the Alhambra. The name of the Tower of the Princesses comes from a legend. According to the legend, the Sultan had 3 daughters, Zaida, Zoraida, and Zorahida. The Sultan locked his daughters in this tower to hide them from the world. But one day, 3 handsome knights arrived. The knights secretly began to meet with the princesses. When the Sultan found out, he was very angry. But it was too late. The princesses had eloped with the knights. This legend perhaps symbolized the fate of the Nasrid dynasty. The once powerful kingdom was now vulnerable, and its enemies were waiting at the gates. From the north, the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon were growing stronger. In 1469, Isabella, Princess of Castile, married Ferdinand, Prince of Aragon. This marriage was a turning point in Spanish history. The two kingdoms united. And now, the fate of Granada was in the hands of these two rulers. Isabella and Ferdinand would be known as the Catholic monarchs, Reyes Católicos. They were not just political leaders. They were also religious fanatics. They wanted to transform Spain into a single religion, a single queen. And for this, Granada had to fall. But in the mid-15th century, Granada was still strong. The city was surrounded by high walls. The Alhambra was an impregnable fortress. And the Nasrids still had an army capable of fighting. But the problem was not outside, but inside. In 1482, the Nasrid dynasty split into two. On one side, there was Sultan Abu el-Hasan Ali, Muley Hassan. On the other side, his son Muhammad, Boabdil. Abu el-Hasan was an aging sultan. He had fought for years, he was tired. Now, he wanted to live in pleasure and luxury in his palace. In his youth, he had married his first wife, Aisha al-Hura, Aixa. Aixa was a strong, determined, ambitious woman. She would do anything to put her son Muhammad, Boabdil, on the throne. But Abu el-Hasan had grown cold towards Aixa. He had fallen in love with a new woman, Isabel de Solis. Isabel was a Christian girl. Her father, Sancho Jiménez de Solís, a Castilian soldier, had died in battle. Isabel had been captured and brought to the harem of the Alhambra. There, she lived as a young and beautiful concubine. When Abu el-Hasan first saw Isabel, he fell in love. He converted Isabel to Islam. He gave her the name Soraya, Thuraya, the Pleiades star cluster, and he married her. Aixa was consumed by jealousy. Not only had she lost her husband's affection, at the same time, Soraya's sons posed a threat to the throne. And so, a civil war began in the Alhambra. In 1452, a boy was born in the Alhambra. His name was Muhammad, but everyone would call him Boabdil. This name was the Spanish corruption of Abu Abdullah, father of Abdullah. Boabdil was Aixa's only son. Aixa worked hard to prepare her son for the throne. She ensured he received the best education. She taught him to read the Quran, write poetry, and wield a sword. Boabdil was a stylish, elegant, sensitive young man. He was fair-haired, a rare trait among Andalusian Arabs. His eyes were light blue. He loved poetry. He enjoyed listening to music and strolling in gardens. But he did not like to fight. Aixa was worried about her son's gentle character. A ruler must be ruthless, she insisted. He must be strong. He must crush his rivals. But Boabdil was different. He was interested in art and science. He saw war as unnecessary savagery. In 1482, Aixa could wait no longer. Abu el-Hasan's marriage to Soraya had driven Aixa to despair, and she planned a coup. Aixa received support from the Abencerrage family. The Abencerrages were one of Granada's most powerful families. 4 years, they had served the Nasrid dynasty. But Abu el-Hasan suspected them. He had imprisoned some Abencerrage chiefs and even had some killed. The Abencerrages wanted revenge. And Boabdil was the perfect tool for them. One night, Aixa and the Abencerrages made their move. They launched a rebellion in the Alhambra. Most of the guards were loyal to Aixa. When Abu el-Hasan returned to the palace, he found the gates locked. Boabdil was proclaimed Sultan in Granada. He was only 30 years old. But now, the fate of the entire kingdom was in his hands. Abu el-Hasan fled to Malaga. There, he joined his brother El-Zagal. The two brothers began to fight against Boabdil. Granada was divided. One part of the city supported Boabdil. The other part, Abu el-Hasan. This civil war was a perfect opportunity for the Catholic monarchs. As the Spanish proverb said, the discord and strife of the Moors is the gain of the Christians. In April 1483, Boabdil made a big mistake. He launched an attack on Castilian territory. His aim was to show his strength and gather more support against his father. But the attack was a disaster. Boabdil's army encountered Castilian forces near Lucena. The battle was short and bloody. Boabdil's soldiers were routed. And at one point, Boabdil's horse got stuck in the mud. Castilian soldiers captured Boabdil. They stripped him, chained him, and took him to El Moro castle. The Sultan of Granada was now a prisoner. Aixa was horrified. She was ready to do anything to save her son. She sent a message to the Catholic King Fernando. She offered a ransom. But Fernando had thought of a cleverer plan. He released Boabdil. But in return, he signed a treaty. According to the treaty, 1. Boabdil would remain loyal to Fernando. 2. He would pay an annual tribute of 12,000 gold coins. 3. He would release Christian captives. 4. And most importantly, one day, he would surrender Granada to the Catholic monarchs. Boabdil signed this treaty. He had no other choice. But by signing it, he also signed his own end. When he returned to Granada, the people saw him as a traitor. "How can it be," they cried, "that our Sultan makes a deal with the enemies?" Abu el-Hasan and El-Zagal seized this opportunity. They tried to retake Granada. But Boabdil, with Fernando's support, fought against them. In the years-long civil war, the Nasrid dynasty bled. Abu el-Hasan died. Boabdil's brother Yusuf was killed by their father. El-Zaghal eventually gave up and went into exile in North Africa. In 1487, Boabdil was once again the sole sultan of Granada. But he was no longer a true sultan. He was Fernando's puppet. And Fernando had decided he no longer needed the puppet. In April 1491, the Catholic monarchs gathered a large army. 50,000 soldiers. He camped outside Granada. The people of Granada were in fear. But at the same time, there was hope. The city was surrounded by strong walls. Food supplies were abundant. Perhaps, the Castilian army would tire and retreat. But Isabella and Ferdinand were determined. For them, Granada was not just a city. It was a symbol. It was the last Islamic stronghold in Spain. And conquering it was the end of the Reconquista. Ferdinand established a siege line around the city. No one would enter, no one would leave. Hunger, disease, despair. These would collapse the city from within. Isabella built a city near the army camp. Its name, Santa Fe, Holy Faith. This temporary city would later become permanent. And one day, another city with the same name would be founded in New Mexico, America. In the Alhambra, Boabdil was in despair. He sent envoys. "We want peace," he said. "Let's make a deal." Ferdinand listened to his offer. But the terms were harsh. 1. Granada would be surrendered to the Catholic monarchs. 2. The Alhambra would be evacuated. 3. All weapons would be surrendered. In return, Boabdil and his family would receive land in the Alpujarras region. Muslims would be able to practice their religion. Their property would be secured. Boabdil was desperate. Hunger had begun in the city. The people were on the verge of rebellion. The army was tired and demoralized. On November 25, 1491, Boabdil signed the treaty. Granada's fate was now clear. But the treaty was secret. It had not yet been announced to the public. Ferdinand feared a rebellion in the city. Months passed. November, December. Granada was silent. But everyone felt the end was near. On the night of January 1, 1492, secretly, the keys to the Alhambra were handed over to Ferdinand. Castilian soldiers quietly entered the fortress. The Nasrid flag was lowered. The Spanish flag was raised on the towers. When morning came, the people of Granada awoke and saw the new flag on the domes. A cry rose. "The Alhambra has fallen." People poured into the streets. Tears, shouts. 781 years of Islamic rule had ended. On the morning of January 2, 1492, Boabdil walked through the Alhambra one last time. He went to the Court of the Myrtles. The sky was reflected on the surface of the pool. But now, that sky no longer belonged to him. He entered the Hall of the Ambassadors. He sat on his throne. He looked at the seven-tiered heaven on its ceiling. "La Galib illallah," he whispered. "There is no victor but Allah. But why has Allah abandoned us today?" He walked to the Court of the Lions. 12 lions carried the fountain on their backs. Silently, faithfully, Boabdil stroked the head of one of the lions. "You will still be here," he said. "But I will not be here." He went to the Generalife Gardens. Cypresses, orange trees, rose gardens. All were waiting for spring. But Boabdil would not see that spring. His mother Aixa arrived. Old, wrinkled but still proud. "My son," she said, "are you ready?" "No, mother," Boabdil replied. "I will never be ready." In the afternoon, they exited through the gate of 7 floors, Puerta de Siete Suelos. Boabdil, his family, the palace staff, a few loyal soldiers. A small caravan. Outside the city, Ferdinand and Isabella waited. Shining armor, ornate horses, the flag of victory. Everything was like a grand spectacle. Boabdil dismounted his horse. He took the keys to the Alhambra. He slowly walked towards Ferdinand. The two men stood face to face. Boabdil looked into Ferdinand's eyes. There was triumph, pride, a slight disdain. Boabdil extended the keys to Ferdinand. "My lord," he said in Arabic, "these are the keys to this paradise. I and those within are now yours." Ferdinand took the keys. He smiled. "Thank you, Don Muhammad," he said in Spanish. Boabdil turned back. He mounted his horse, and the caravan set off south, towards the Alpujarras. The road climbed into the mountains. Hours passed. Finally, near El Pajal, they reached a high pass. Boabdil stopped his horse. He turned back. And from that moment, for the first time, he saw Granada from afar. The city lay in the valley. Red walls, white houses, green gardens, and at the very top, the Alhambra. The sun was setting. The palace glowed with golden light. Boabdil's eyes welled up. A sob rose in his throat. Then, tears flowed. Aixa looked at her son. In her eyes, there was not sorrow, but anger. "Weep," she said in a harsh voice. "Weep like a woman for what you could not defend, like a man." These words pierced Boabdil's heart like an arrow. He bowed his head. He did not look any further. And the caravan moved on. Granada was left behind them. It disappeared from sight. From that moment on, that pass would be known by a name: Suspiro del Moro, the Moor's sigh, or the Moor's lament. Boabdil, with his family, settled in a small mansion in the village of Laujar de Andarax, in the Alpujarras. According to the treaty, he had been given lands. But these could not compare to the magnificent palaces of the Alhambra. Days, months passed. Boabdil slowly accepted the reality. But acceptance did not alleviate the pain. His wife, Marema, fell ill in early 1493. She could not be cured. She died shortly after. Boabdil was devastated. He had now lost not only Granada but also his beloved. That same year, Boabdil made a decision. "I cannot stay in Spain," he said. "Every corner reminds me of my sorrows." He sold the lands given to him to Fernando. He received 30,000 gold coins. And he migrated to North Africa, to Morocco. He settled in the city of Fez, in Morocco. There, he lived a simple life. He was no longer a sultan, just an immigrant, an exile. In 1533, there was a battle outside Fez. Boabdil joined the war to help the Moroccan sultan. And there, on the battlefield, he died. His grave is in Fez, under a simple stone. On it, only his name is written: Abu Abdullah Muhammad al-Zugabi. Al-Zugabi, the unfortunate. But some sources tell another story. They say that Boabdil wanted to return to Granada, but he never succeeded. They recount that he saw the Alhambra in his dreams at night, and woke up with tears in his eyes in the morning. And perhaps, this is more accurate. Because even though Boabdil died physically in Morocco, his soul always remained in Granada. After Boabdil left, the Alhambra remained empty. The Catholic monarchs did not settle there. The palace was too Muslim for them. Years passed. The Alhambra was neglected. The roofs rotted. The walls cracked. The gardens were overgrown with weeds. In 1526, Emperor Charles V, Charles I in Spain, came to Granada. He saw the Alhambra, and he was impressed. But according to him, the palace was not modern. He wanted to build a Renaissance palace. And so, the palace of Charles V began to be built right next to the Alhambra. A massive, circular, Italian-style structure. But construction was never completed. It stopped at the beginning of the 17th century. And today, it stands as an unfinished monument. During construction, some parts of the Alhambra were destroyed. The Nasrid cemetery was desecrated. Sultan tombs were opened. Bones were removed. Before going into exile, Boabdil had moved the bones of his ancestors to a secret location. But where he took them is still unknown today. In the 18th century, the Alhambra deteriorated further. The palace became a dwelling for beggars, nomads, and thieves. Plaster was stolen from the walls. Marble columns were broken. In 1812, during the Peninsular War, Napoleon's army occupied Granada. French soldiers used the Alhambra as a powder magazine. As they left, they tried to blow up some towers. But a Spanish soldier, José Garcia, extinguished the fuses and saved the Alhambra. In 1821, a major earthquake occurred. The Alhambra was severely damaged. Walls collapsed. Ceilings fell. But in the 19th century, something changed. Romantic writers discovered the Alhambra. Washington Irving came to Granada in 1829. He stayed in the Alhambra for several weeks. And in 1832, he published his book, Tales of the Alhambra. This book resonated greatly throughout the world. People were captivated by the beauty, mystery, and history of the Alhambra. Tourists began to arrive. The Spanish government decided to restore the Alhambra. In 1828, the architect José Contreras began restoration work. In the 1930s, Leopoldo Torres Balbus led a major renovation campaign. Today, the Alhambra is one of the most visited monuments in the world. 3 million tourists come annually. UNESCO, in 1984, it added the Alhambra and Generalife to the World Heritage List. But the Alhambra is not just a tourist attraction. It is a memory. It is a monument to a civilization, a culture, a dream. To truly understand the Alhambra, it is not enough to just look at it from the outside. One must go inside, examine every detail, explore every corner. In the Alhambra, water was not just a necessity. It was a philosophy. The Nasrids came from the desert. For them, water was life itself. And in the Alhambra, water was everywhere. Water brought from the Darro River through arched aqueducts to the fortress first flowed into large reservoirs. From there, it was distributed through underground channels to every palace, every garden. The pool in the Court of the Myrtles was not just decorative. It was also like a mirror. The sky, the columns, the arches, all were reflected in the water. And this reflection symbolized eternity. The fountain in the Court of the Lions was a marvel of engineering. 12 lions, through a system powered by water pressure, spouted equal amounts of water. It was as precise as a clock. The water channels in the Generalife made music. As the water flowed over the stones, it produced sounds of different tones. It was like a symphony. The architects of the Alhambra masterfully used light. In the Hall of the Ambassadors, windows were strategically placed. The sun entered from different angles throughout the day. In the morning, light entering from the east window painted the walls gold. In the afternoon, light entering from the west window made the muqarnas on the ceiling sparkle. In the evening, the red light of the sunset seemed to set the entire hall ablaze. In the Court of the Lions, the play of light and shadow was even more striking. 124 columns refracted sunlight in different ways. Shadows formed geometric patterns on the ground. And these patterns changed according to the time of day. It was as if the ground was alive, breathing. In the ceiling of the Hall of the Two Sisters, there were small windows. Sunlight entered through these windows, refracting among the muqarnas, creating star-like sparkles within the hall. On the walls of the Alhambra, there are thousands of inscriptions. Quranic verses, poems, historical records. The most frequently repeated phrase is, La Ghalib illallah. There is no victor but Allah, the motto of the Nasrid dynasty. But beyond that, there are much deeper messages. On the walls of the Hall of the Ambassadors, this verse is inscribed. This throne of my Sultan is more beautiful than the throne of paradise. In the Court of the Lions, the poems of Ibn Zumruk are inscribed. This courtyard is a garden whose beauty dazzles the eyes. Clarity flows from its stone, happiness from its water. In the Hall of the Two Sisters, I am a garden that is adorned every morning. The beauty of my Sultan illuminates me. These poems are not just ornamentation. They reflect the worldview of the Nasrid sultans. Beauty, wisdom, closeness to Allah, all together. To understand the colors of the Alhambra, one must look to the past. Today, the walls are mostly white and brown. But in fact, the Alhambra used to be very colorful. Plaster carvings used to be painted red, blue, green, gold. Each color carried a meaning. Red symbolized power and passion. Blue, the sky and eternity. Green, paradise and peace. Gold, divine light. Tiles, azulejos, were laid with star patterns. Each star represented geometric perfection. But over time, the paints faded. The tiles broke. Today, only a few original colors remain. During restoration work, researchers found traces of old paints. And in some rooms, these colors were recreated. Now, in some parts of the Alhambra, we can see colorful walls as they were in the 14th century. The Generalife Gardens are not just beautiful. They are a cosmological map. In Islamic tradition, the garden represents paradise. And in the Quran, paradise is described as follows. 4 rivers flow, rivers of honey, milk, water, and wine. Trees are laden with fruits. Shadows are cool and peaceful. The Generalife was built precisely with this description in mind. There are 4 main gardens. Each garden represents a river. Water channels flow in 4 directions. Trees, orange, pomegranate, olive, cypress, bearing fruit throughout the seasons. The canopies are resting places on hot days. And in the middle of the gardens, there is a small pavilion. This is the Sultan's meditation place. He would sit there, watch nature, and contemplate Allah. Over the centuries, countless legends have formed around the Alhambra. Some are based on truth. Some are entirely imaginary. But all of them enrich the mystical atmosphere of the Alhambra. One of the most famous legends is the Aben Seraj massacre. According to legend, Sultan Boabdil's wife, Marema, had a forbidden affair with a young man from the Aben Seraj family. When Boabdil learned of this, he went mad with rage. One night, he invited all the Aben Seraj chiefs to the hall of the Aben Serajes. "We will have a feast," he said. But in reality, it was a trap. When the Aben Serajes entered the hall, the doors were locked. And Boabdil's soldiers rushed in. Swords were drawn. Blood flowed. 36 Aben Seraj chiefs were killed that night. Their blood flowed into the pool in the hall. And even today, the red stains on the ceiling are traces of that massacre. In reality, this legend is entirely fictional. The stains on the ceiling come from water containing iron oxide. And the Aben Seraj family had supported Boabdil, not opposed him. But the legend is so powerful that many people still believe it today. Another legend speaks of a hidden treasure. Zariab is a famous musician who lived in the 9th century. He came from Baghdad to Andalusia and lived in Córdoba. But according to legend, he also possessed great wealth, gold, jewels, rare items. When Zariab died, he buried his treasure under the Alhambra. And he left a map. But this map was never found. For centuries, treasure hunters have dug under the Alhambra. They have searched for secret passages, underground chambers. But they have found nothing. Some believe the treasure is still there. Perhaps one day, a tourist will accidentally press a secret button, and a wall will open. In the Generalife, there is an old tree called the Sultan Soraya cypress. It is estimated to be 700 years old. According to legend, Sultan Abu el-Hasan's wife, Soraya, secretly met with an Aben Seraj youth under this tree. When Abu el-Hasan learned of this, he had the youth killed. But he forgave Soraya. Soraya was very saddened by the death of her lover. Every day, she would come under the cypress tree and cry. Her tears flowed into the soil. And the tree grew with these tears. Today, the tree's trunk is very thick. Its branches reach up to the sky. And when the wind blows, the leaves rustle, as if they were Soraya's moans. The Tower of the Princesses has a curse of its own. According to legend, the Sultan's 3 daughters, Zaida, Zoraida, Zorahida, lived in this tower. The Sultan locked them in the tower to hide them from the world. But one day, a sorcerer buried a box in the tower's garden. And inside the box, there was a magic mirror. This mirror showed the girls their futures. The girls found the mirror. They looked into it. And they saw that all three of them would marry Christian knights. When the Sultan learned of this, he was very angry. He broke the mirror. But it was too late. Fate was written. And indeed, the girls ran away with the knights. Today, tourists entering the Tower of the Princesses say they hear strange sounds. Sometimes, a whisper. Sometimes, a laugh. Sometimes, a crying sound. Perhaps, the spirits of the princesses are still wandering there. The fall of Granada was not just the loss of a city. It was the end of an era. The year 1492 was a turning point in world history. In the same year, Granada fell, January 2nd. Jews were expelled from Spain, March 31st. Christopher Columbus discovered America, October 12th. These three events were interconnected. After the fall of Granada, the Catholic monarchs issued an edict: all Jews must leave Spain. Otherwise, they must convert to Christianity. This edict destroyed the Jewish community that had lived in Spain for hundreds of years. Approximately 200,000 Jews left their homes, possessions, and businesses and emigrated. Some went to Portugal, some to North Africa, some to the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II opened its doors to the Spanish Jews. "The King of Spain is a fool," he said. "He is impoverishing his own country and enriching me." Indeed, the Jews were Spain's most skilled merchants, doctors, and scientists. Their emigration caused great damage to the Spanish economy. Christopher Columbus had sought support from the King of Spain for years. "If I sail west, I can reach India," he had insisted. But the kings were busy with the Granada War. They had kept Columbus waiting. After Granada fell, they finally accepted Columbus. And on April 17, 1492, in Santa Fe, they signed a treaty. Columbus would receive 3 ships and a crew. On August 3, Columbus set sail from Spain. On October 12, he reached the shores of America. Columbus thought he had arrived in India, but in fact, he had discovered a new continent. And this discovery changed world history forever. Spain became an empire. The trade in gold, silver, and slaves began. And millions of indigenous people died due to disease, war, and forced labor. After Granada fell, the Inquisition in Spain intensified. The Inquisition was an institution of the Catholic Church. It was established to find and punish heretics. But in Spain, the Inquisition went even further. It targeted Moriscos, Christians converted from Islam, and conversos, Christians converted from Judaism. Thousands were accused of being false Christians. They were tortured. They were burned. In 1609, all Moriscos were expelled from Spain. Approximately 300,000 people left their homes and possessions. Spain was now a monolingual, mono-religious country. But this purity came at a great cost. The economy collapsed. Cultural diversity disappeared. And perhaps, that is why Spain never regained its former power. In the 19th century, the Romantic movement began in Europe. Romantic writers, poets, and painters sought distant, exotic, mysterious places. And the Alhambra was a perfect discovery. Washington Irving and Tales of the Alhambra. In 1829, American writer Washington Irving came to Spain. He visited Granada. And when he saw the Alhambra, he was captivated. Irving stayed in the Alhambra for several weeks. He wandered through the rooms, sat in the gardens, and talked to the local people. He listened to the legends. And in 1832, he published his book, Tales of the Alhambra. The book was a great success. Irving presented the Alhambra not just as a monument, but as a living story. Every room, every tower, every fountain had a past. The book generated great interest in Europe and America. People flocked to Granada to see the Alhambra. Tourism began. Today, Irving's name lives on in the Alhambra. The Washington Irving Room, is where he stayed. In the 19th century, many painters visited and painted the Alhambra. John Frederick Lewis was an English painter. He lived in Granada from 1833 to 1834. He drew scenes inside the Alhambra, colorful, detailed, full of life. David Roberts was a Scottish painter. He came to Granada in 1833. He drew the exterior of the Alhambra, magnificent, imposing, romantic. Jean-Léon Gérôme was a French painter. He was a leader of the Orientalist movement. He depicted the Alhambra as an exotic Eastern fantasy. These paintings were exhibited in Europe. They were published in newspapers. They were used in books. And the Alhambra became one of the most famous monuments in the world. Composers also drew inspiration from the Alhambra. Francisco Tárrega, a Spanish guitarist, composed a piece called Recuerdos de la Alhambra, Memories of the Alhambra, in 1896. It is played with the guitar tremolo technique. The melody is melancholic, nostalgic, and beautiful. It seems to recall the lost times of the Alhambra. Claude Debussy, a French composer, wrote the piano piece La Puerta del Vino, the Wine Gate, inspired by a gate in the Alhambra. The music was full of Spanish rhythms. Isaac Albéniz, a Spanish composer, wrote a piano piece called Granada. Romantic, passionate, dreamlike. In literature, the Alhambra appears again and again. Victor Hugo, the French poet, wrote a poem called Grenade, Granada. Lord Byron, the English poet, Don Juan, mentioned Granada in its epic poem. Federico Garcia Lorca was a poet born in Granada. The Alhambra frequently appears in his poems. In Romancero Gitano, he expresses the soul of Granada and the mystery of the Alhambra. And so, the Alhambra ceased to be merely a structure. It became a legend, a symbol, a source of inspiration. In the 20th century, great efforts were made to preserve the Alhambra. In the 1870s, the Spanish government declared the Alhambra a national monument. This guaranteed the preservation of the structure. In 1907, the management of the Alhambra was transferred to a special commission. This commission oversaw the restoration work. Leopoldo Torres Balbus was the chief architect of the Alhambra between 1923 to 1936. He initiated a major restoration campaign. Balbus preferred to use original materials. He used traditional mortar, not modern cement. He did not paint the walls white, but researched their original colors. He also removed modern additions within the Alhambra. For example, the Mekshur Hall had been converted into a chapel by the Christians. Balbus restored the chapel and returned the hall to its original state. Between 1936 to 1939, the Spanish Civil War took place. It was a bloody conflict between Republicans and Francoists. Granada was under Francoist control. The city was subjected to bombardments. But the Alhambra miraculously remained undamaged. After the war, the Franco dictatorship began. Franco tried to present the Alhambra as part of Spain's Catholic heritage. He overshadowed the Alhambra's Islamic identity. But in 1975, Franco died. Democracy returned. And the Alhambra regained its true identity. In 1984, UNESCO added the Alhambra and Generalife to the World Heritage List. In 1994, the Albayacin neighborhood was also added to the list. This meant that the Alhambra was placed under international protection. It was now the heritage not only of Spain, but of all humanity. Today, the restoration of the Alhambra continues. Every year, new research is conducted. New information is discovered. New technologies are used. For example, 3D scanners digitally record every centimeter of the Alhambra. If an earthquake or disaster occurs one day, this data can be used to rebuild the Alhambra. Chemical analyses identify original paints and materials. Laser cleaning removes dirt from the walls without causing damage. The Alhambra is no longer just a monument of the past. It is also a heritage of the future. Today, visiting the Alhambra is a fascinating experience. The visit usually begins at the Gate of Justice. The hand and key figure above the gate are still there. And they still recall that old legend: the Alhambra will only fall when the hand eats the key. When you enter through the gate, you reach a garden. Trees, flowers, fountains. Everything brings peace. Then, you climb to the Alcazaba, the military fortress. From the top of the towers, you can see the entire panorama of Granada city. The city stretches out in the valley. The houses are white and pristine. In the background, the Sierra Nevada mountains are snow-capped. As you enter the Nasrid palaces, you feel time stand still. You start with the Mekshur. This is the hall where the Sultan met with his advisors. Simple, yet elegant. Then, you move on to the Comares Palace. You stand in the Court of the Myrtles. The pool is like a mirror. The sky is reflected in the water. The arches around you are adorned with plaster carvings. The inscription, La Galib Ilala, is everywhere on the walls. When you enter the Hall of Ambassadors, it takes your breath away. The ceiling is so high, so detailed, that you can look up for hours. The seven heavens are there, above. Then, you enter the Court of the Lions. And you freeze. 124 columns, like a forest. The arches, like lace. 12 lions support the fountain, spouting water from their mouths. You enter the Hall of the Two Sisters, the Hall of the Abencerrages, the Hall of the Kings. Each is a separate world. When you go to the general life, you find the peace of nature. The gardens are full of flowers. Water channels gurgle. Cypresses reach for the sky. Birds sing. And for a moment, you imagine you are in the 14th century. You are strolling in the Sultan's garden. The world is peaceful and beautiful. Wars, sorrows, losses, all are far away. But then, you return to reality. The Alhambra is no longer the center of a kingdom. It is a museum, a monument. Boabdil is gone. There are no sultans. There are only tourists. But perhaps, this is enough. Because the Alhambra is still standing. Still beautiful. Still inspiring. The story of the Alhambra teaches us many lessons. The Alhambra was built as a defensive fortress. But what made it immortal was not its military might, but its beauty. Wars ended long ago. Armies disappeared. But art is still standing. This reminds us, true power is not in the sword, but in beauty. True victory is not defeating the enemy, but creating something. Andalusia was a place where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived together for centuries. This diversity created a magnificent civilization. Science, art, philosophy, all emerged from this diversity. But after 1492, diversity was destroyed. One religion, one language, one culture. And the result? Poverty, ignorance, backwardness. This reminds us, diversity is richness. Difference is strength. Tolerance is civilization. The Nasrids built the Alhambra to make it eternal. But nothing is eternal. On its walls they wrote, La Galib Illallah. There is no victor but Allah. This was a truth. Human power, no matter how great, is temporary. Boabdil learned this in the most bitter way. Once, he was the ruler of a kingdom. Then, he became an exile. And finally, he was remembered in history only as unfortunate. This reminds us, be humble. Do not be arrogant. Because one day, you too will turn to dust. The Alhambra could have been destroyed. It could have been forgotten. But people protected it, restored it, remembered it. Washington Irving wrote its legends. Painters painted it. Musicians composed music. And so, the Alhambra lived on. This reminds us, do not forget the past. Because the past is our identity. Cherish your roots. Protect them. Pass them on to future generations. It is night. The city of Granada sleeps. The streets are silent. But the Alhambra never sleeps. The moonlight illuminates the domes. Shadows dance on the walls. The wind whispers in the gardens. And perhaps, if you listen very carefully, you can hear sounds. In the court of the myrtles, the gurgle of water. But perhaps, it is not just water. Perhaps, the whispers of sultans. In the court of the lions, the spouting of water from the lions. But perhaps, it is not just water. Perhaps, the sighs of lost times. In the hall of the ambassadors, the howling of the wind. But perhaps, it is not just the wind. Perhaps, the poems of Muhammad V. In the general life, the rustling of leaves. But perhaps, it is not just leaves. Perhaps, Saraya's tears. And perhaps, somewhere, Boabdil is still looking at the Alhambra. From afar, very far away. Tears in his eyes, longing in his heart. One day, he whispers, one day I will return. But that day will never come. Because that day exists in dreams. Not in reality. But perhaps, this does not matter. Because the Alhambra is still there. Still beautiful. Still magical. And every day, thousands of people visit it. They admire it. They take photos. They listen to stories. And so, the Alhambra lives on. Not just as stone and plaster, but as imagination and memory. Granada fell. Boabdil left. The Nasrids disappeared. But the Alhambra is still standing. And it will stand forever. Because beauty never dies. Because art is never lost. Because dreams never end. The night is far advanced. The moon is in the middle of the sky. The stars, countless, bright. At the top of the Alhambra, there is a point. That is the highest part of the Comares Tower. If you go up there and look up, you will see this. The seven-layered sky. Stars in geometric arrangements. Galaxies, light years away. And beyond all this, infinity. Muhammad V, when he was building the ceiling of the Hall of the Ambassadors, wanted to see exactly this. The sky, cast in stone. Infinity, captured in earth. But the real sky is more beautiful than stone. The real infinity is greater than art. And perhaps, this is the greatest lesson of the Alhambra. People can try to create heaven on earth. They can build palaces, plant gardens, make fountains. But true heaven is not here. It is above, beyond the stars. And one day, we will all go there. Boabdil is gone. Aixa is gone. Muhammad V is gone. Isabella and Ferdinand are also gone. And one day, we will be gone too. But their memories will remain here. In stone, in plaster, in poetry, in legend. And perhaps, that is enough. Because immortality is not living forever. Immortality is being remembered. And the Alhambra will be remembered forever. This story is based on historical facts. However, some parts have been romanticized to enhance literary effect. Dialogues and some personal details are fictional. But the main events, the construction of the Alhambra, the history of the Nasrid dynasty, the tragic story of Boabdil, and the fall of Granada, are all real. The Alhambra still stands in Granada today. You can visit it. You can see it. You can touch it. And perhaps, while you are there, you can hear the voices from centuries ago. Perhaps, the poems of Muhammad V. Perhaps, the sighs of Boabdil. Perhaps, the echoes of a lost paradise. Listen carefully. The Alhambra still speaks.